Okay, well, thanks very much, Carrie, and thank you guys all for coming. Today we're going to talk about spinning up WordPress on Windows Azure. A little about myself and Mark first. I'm Matthew Groves. I'm a web developer for Zimbra and a Microsoft MVP. And I used to teach WordPress as a professor at Capital University, so I could probably talk about WordPress all day. So feel free to ask questions in the chat room or just in your microphone if you'd like. And helping me today is Mark. If you want to talk about yourself real quick, Mark.
Yeah, I'm the lone dev at a small web development, a small insurance company. So the cloud is super helpful for me because it gives me everything I need.
Yeah, and Mark is, I would call him Windows Azure expert, and he could talk about Azure all day. So between the two of us, I'm sure we'll be able to get something working here today with WordPress on Azure. So let's just talk about WordPress here real quick. I think it's a great content management system. It's really easy to install and use, as you'll see today. It's free and open source. It's used by a lot of people, 19% of the top websites, making it the most popular CMS in the world. And one of the things I like about it is that it's not a particularly complicated product, but it has lots of plugins that allow you to do a variety of different things with your WordPress site. I also like Windows Azure a lot. It's easy to create websites on Azure, and as we'll see today, very easy to do. It's once you get them created, it's easy to scale them and configure them. Very competitive pricing, and there's a growing gallery of applications, including WordPress, that you can just install right out of the box on Azure site using the gallery, and we'll see some of that today. So here is what I plan to cover today. We may go off the rails here if you guys have other questions or if you want to cover other material, but I plan to show you how to install WordPress on Windows Azure. It's a very quick and easy process. We'll do a quick scratch the surface tour of WordPress. We won't touch a fraction of the functionality that you can do with it, but I just want to give you a quick tour of it. We'll talk about configuring email. This is one of the things that's you know, with traditional hosting, it's not a big deal with WordPress, but with Azure, it's a little more work you have to do to get that to work. We'll talk about security with WordPress. Very important, whether you're using cloud or not, to make sure your WordPress site is adequately secured. We'll talk about hosting files on WordPress, and you can use the file system, or you can use Azure Storage Service with blobs. So that's what I plan to cover today. We have some other stuff we could talk about with comments and spam filtering if we have time, but also I want to leave time for any questions you guys have. Be glad to cover anything, and with that, let's just get to it. So once you have your Azure account created, you should be familiar with this screen. This is the Windows Azure dashboard, and this is a screenshot of my dashboard of all these services I have running on my account right now. But we're going to look at the bottom left portion of the screen here, which has the little new icon. We'll go ahead and click that, and that'll take us to this little wizard here that allows us to select what kind of service we want to create, which is a compute service. And under compute, there's several options. We'll go with website because we're doing a website today, and from gallery. And when you click on the from gallery, you'll see okay, compute website from gallery. Yep. Okay, you'll see a screen like this, which is kind of like a mobile phone app store, except for websites for Azure. And there's a whole list of different products that you can install here. One of them is WordPress. It's right there on the list. The bottom of the list, because it starts with a W, but it's right there, so you just click on that and you can install a WordPress site. Nothing, no crazy downloading of zip files and using FTP or anything like that. You just click on this link and get started. Another option on this list, which actually pointed out to me, maybe he can talk about it a little bit, is called Brand New WordPress. Mark, you want to talk about Brand New a little bit?
Yeah, so Brand New is a group of people out in Poland, I just found out tonight, that have created a WordPress clone, or a fork rather, that gives it Microsoft SQL backend instead of the MySQL, which is the normal way of running WordPress. With if you select the WordPress one down at the bottom of the list, it'll spin up a MySQL database for you. If you do the brand new one, it will spin up a little SQL server for you. They are extremely similar, but I find that with Microsoft SQL being a first-class citizen on Windows Azure, and it uses SQL Azure on its own, it runs a little smoother. There's also some weird things about the MySQL on WordPress has 4 concurrent connections, so the WordPress can only talk to the database with 4 little voices. If you get slashdotted or hacker newsed or whatever, you're going to hit that really, really quick. Even if you're not, if you just have somebody navigating quickly around your site, you find yourself bumping up against that. So I think the brand new one gives you a little more flexibility with that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark, and thanks for introducing me to this. Is actually what I'm going to be using today is brand new. I'll take you through a brand new installation, but it's very, very similar. With WordPress, you do get MySQL. It's through another vendor, I think called ClearDB. So it's another service. It's not Azure itself. It's ClearDB's is the provider there. So,
just to make it clear,
sorry,
it's either way, the database is sitting on Microsoft servers.
Right. It's
just with the MS SQL one, Microsoft's managing it. With the ClearDB, ClearDB is managing it.
Right.
So it's running on the same hardware. They're still in the same racks. It's just who's in charge of making sure it's up to date.
Right. And I've used the ClearDB one. I use that to my class at the university, and then that works great. So if that's what you want to go with, that's totally a good choice as well. So what you're going to see today, you're not going to notice much difference, but it's just sort of a choice you'll have to decide if you want Microsoft SQL or MySQL. Okay, so once I click on that brand new in the gallery there, I'll see a screen similar to this one. It's just a wizard that takes you through the initial configuration and setup of the website. So you first have to specify a URL, just like any other Azure website. You get the subdomain on azurewebsites.net as part of that. So I'm calling my site brandnewtest.azurewebsites.net. And then you have to choose a database or choose to create a new database. On the screen here, I'm just creating a new one in the East US region. And then you have to set up a database username and password, or enter one if you're already using an existing database. If you never used Azure before, you'll have to create a new one here. And then you hit the right arrow on the wizard here. You go to the next screen where, since I'm creating a database, I have to specify my database settings, a server name, login name and password, and the region here. And the region should be the same region as your website. Otherwise, you're going to incur additional charges from having 2 different parts of the country have to talk to each other. So if you select East for the website, you should select East for the database as well. So that's it. You hit the check mark there. Azure goes to work. And you'll see a new item show up in your list, like at the top of the screen here. You can see my brand new test site is spinning up there. It'll have the word creating there in the status column as it's working to create that. And there'll be a notification message at the bottom saying that it's deploying the site to brand new test. Then after 30 seconds, 60 seconds or so, not very long, you'll see that brand new test changes from creating in the status column to running in the status column. And you'll also see the database server show up there as well. SQL database is now online. And another message at the bottom of the screen saying that the website creation succeeded. And that's it. It's really that easy to get the site up and running on Azure. It's incredibly simple. If you go to the list of your websites on your Azure dashboard, you'll see an entry like this. So brand new test, it's running, it's in the East US. And at the very right side, you'll see a link here, a URL to the website. So once that's set up and created and running, just go ahead and click that, and it'll take you over to your website, and you can start working on your website. So at this point, we're going to leave Azure, and we're going to head over to our site, which WordPress, and we'll see the WordPress installation wizard. And just like Azure, WordPress, very, very easy to set up. You just enter a site title, a username. You have to create one user to get started, a password, an email address, and you can check the box there if you want to allow search engines to see the site. And then click Install WordPress. And that's all there is to it. So just with a few clicks there, you've gone from no site to a functional WordPress site. So once you click the login button there, you'll go to the WordPress dashboard after you enter your username and password, and you'll see the WordPress dashboard, which is separate from the Azure dashboard. Now, with brand new, you might see this message at the top of the screen that says a WordPress update is available, and you won't see that if you use the regular WordPress installation. And so I have a couple of theories why this might be the case. For one, Mark said that brand new is a fork of normal WordPress. So when WordPress releases a new version, brand new has to release a corresponding version. So that may take some time for them to actually do that. So that's why this brand new version may be a little bit lagging behind the WordPress version. Additionally, once brand new gets their code updated, they have to then push that out to the Azure gallery. So they have to submit that to Microsoft and has to get pushed into the gallery, so that might take some time as well. So that's why you might see that this message says, you know, your WordPress site is out of date, please update now. Fortunately for us, WordPress has a built-in update feature, so all we have to do is just click that button and update, and it'll do it for us through the back door, essentially. We'll go right to WordPress and get the new version instead of having to wait for it to show up on Azure. So it's just something I wanted to make you aware of. That message might show up. It's nothing to panic about. Just go ahead and update, and you'll be fine. Sorry, go ahead.
If you are continuing on and keeping your blog active, you're going to have to do this eventually, because WordPress is a living and being developed constantly. So you are going to have to do this one day, eventually, either way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually, WordPress has a new auto-update feature that they're rolling out now. So you may want to just set that to auto-update that for you so you don't have to actually go in here and click every time there's a new version out, because it does happen fairly often. Okay, so that is all the slides I wanted to show you. So I already have a site already set up on my Azure account. So the rest of this session is going to be all live on the browser. So something may go wrong, and that's kind of half the reason I have Mark here. In case something goes wrong, he can help me to fix it very quickly. So here is my dashboard, and you can see my brand new test is here. I can click on this link and go right over to a WordPress site. You can see this is the default WordPress theme. So if you like orange circles, this is the theme for you. But of course, with WordPress, you can change the theme to whatever you like. I'm not going to do that today. You can do that very easily. It's one of the most popular things about WordPress. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my site now. So here's my login screen, and let me just get my username, mgroves, and password. And I'm logged here to the dashboard. So just a quick nickel tour of how WordPress works. You can see on the left side there's a few features here. WordPress was originally a blog engine, so it was, blogs is a major feature of WordPress still, although there's lots of other functionality as far as content is concerned. So I'll just go do a blog post here real quick. Go to the posts, and it'll give you a list of all the blog posts. There's one that is created for me out of the box. I'll just create a new one. Hello from Matt and Mark. Lorem ipsum. And there's lots of options here to categorize your post, and you can add images to it, and you can edit the HTML and so on, but that's good enough for now. I'll go ahead and publish that. So it's published. You can see here I can go ahead and view the post, and it'll take me to the public portion of the website, and there's our blog post there. Very, very simple to do that. And then I'm already logged in as a user on this site, so I could leave a comment. Check out my site, spammy.com, post a comment. And you can see WordPress lists the comments under the blog post here as well. Of course, there's a problem here, is that I'm spamming my spam site. So if I go back to my WordPress dash, I can also manage the comments. So there's a comment already here out of the box, but here's my comment that's for spammy.com. So I have full control over this comment. I can unapprove it, I can mark it as spam, I can trash it, I can edit it to redact this website out of there if I wanted to. I have full control over those comments. So that is sort of the nickel tour of WordPress functionality, just posting comments. So let's talk about.
Okay, sorry. Hey, it's Carrie. I have a quick question, if I can, on the other. So when you are managing those comments, can you set automatic rules that will manage them based on certain criteria? Like if you do have keywords that you don't want to allow in a comment, can you set a rule to automatically delete it?
You sure can. So WordPress has built in some word filtering functionality. So you can set, for instance, if you don't want to allow cursing on your site, you can set curse words to make those comments not be displayed publicly. Or you can also set some spam keywords that'll, if they appear in a comment, they'll be marked as spam automatically. However, I found that approach to be kind of a losing battle. You're never going to get enough coverage there to get all the curse words and all the spam words out of your comments. So there are some other approaches you can take, like a CAPTCHA or even a plugin called Akismet, which we can talk about later on if you'd like. But it's sort of a way to automatically detect if a comment is spam or not, and it works really great. And it's from the same people who made WordPress, so we can look into that as well. But yeah, you can absolutely, you have full control over comments. You can make them anonymous, or you can require a login, and anywhere in between. So you have lots of control there.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, so let's go back to that login screen here real quickly. So this is the screen I showed you when I logged in before. Now, this happened a lot to my students. They'd show up to class on Tuesday, they'd create their WordPress site, they'd come back on Thursday, and they would forget their password. So what they'd try to do is they would say, okay, I lost my password. They click this link here, and then they have to type in their username or their email that they use to create the site. And so when you do this, you click Get New Password, and normally WordPress will send you an email with a password reset link. However, with Azure, that's a problem, because Azure websites do not have email servers on them. And there's a good reason for that, because people would take advantage and start sending out spam emails and get the entire data centers blacklisted as spam centers. So Microsoft just says, no, we're not going to allow emails to be sent from these web servers. So we need to figure out a way to deal with this with WordPress, because we need to have it send out emails. So let me log back in here if I can find my password. There it is. So what I'd like to do is to configure WordPress to use some third-party email server. And for instance, I could use SendGrid, which is a service that all I do is send emails, or MailChimp, a similar service. Or I could use a free service like with my Outlook.com account, or even with my Gmail account. You can actually configure WordPress to use those accounts to send emails on behalf of the site. But if you look under the settings over here on your WordPress dashboard, there really isn't anything to configure that email. WordPress was built originally for traditional hosting, and they just made the assumption that everyone who has a web server also has an email server on that same box, so they didn't build in any functionality to set that configuration. So we actually have to go and install a plugin to do this. So with WordPress, you're going to be installing plugins. You're going to be installing lots of them. So let's just go through how to do that, and the first one we'll install will help us to configure our email. So here's the plugin screen, and we can click Add New. And it's again, this is very much like a mobile phone app store. You can search for plugins. So the one I like to use for this, there's lots of them, but the one I like to use is called WordPress Mail SMTP. So SMTP is the type of mail protocol, and we can search plugins for that. It'll give us a whole list of plugins we can install that match those keywords. The first one is what I want, I think. I can click on Details here and see that this plugin has been updated very recently, so it's an active plugin. It's been downloaded over 600,000 times, so it's also very popular. So this seems like a good choice for me to use, and I can look at some of the screenshots and documentation. I've already used it before, so I'm going to go ahead and click Install Now. So I'm now downloading a plugin from the WordPress plugin gallery, and it's being installed on my site. So I just downloaded a zip file and added it to my file system. If I go back to my plugins list, you can see that now this new plugin has showed up here, WP Mail SMTP. And you can't really tell because everything is deactivated, but plugins that are activated will be a different color. It'll be like a gray row here. This one's not activated. It's installed, but it's not actually being used. So what I can do is I can go ahead and just click Activate. And I kind of can't really see, at least on my screen, but this is a darker gray color here now that it's activated. So once I activated that plugin, if I go over here to Settings, you'll see that there's a new setting here called Email. So this allows me to actually now configure how WordPress sends its emails. So I can set the from email, the from name. I can choose to use SMTP, or I can choose to use the built-in mail function, which won't work with Azure, but I could configure it to do that. And then I actually have to set up the SMTP server. And this will vary based on who you use. By the way, if you want to use SendGrid, I believe for Azure users, you can get a free account with SendGrid that allows you to send out some ridiculous amount of emails per day, like 10,000 emails a day, which is more than enough for a site like this. So you would put in the details there. It's something like smtp.sendgrid.net or whatever that is, and whatever their port number is, encryption, authentication, and SendGrid will give you a username and password that you'd enter here. And so you just set up your WordPress to tell it where to actually send the emails from. And then this plugin allows you to test those emails. Now mine won't work because that's not correct credentials, but if I hit send test here, it'll just try to send an email message and tell you if it worked or not. And you can see that I'm getting the error here, could not authenticate, which makes sense because I put in bogus information. So this is the first thing I would do if I were you, setting up a WordPress site on Azure, just in case you lose a password. You want to reset it without having to dig around in the database. Set up an email plugin so that you can do that. And if you want to set up users on your site, they can also do that. So that's the way to do that, is to call WP Mail SMTP. So any questions on that? Looks pretty quiet over here in the chat room. You guys can still hear me?
Yes, sorry,
okay.
We're here.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. So next up is I would be looking at security. So if you guys have heard of WordPress before, chances are you've probably heard about it as some sort of security breach or some sort of exploitation on WordPress, and it's not as bad as it used to be. But in the mid-2000s, late 2000s, WordPress was under attack a lot, and they were making the fixes all the time. They were plugging these security holes, but it wasn't as easy to update WordPress as it is now. So people were running old, insecure versions of WordPress and getting hacked all the time. So it has kind of a reputation for security issues, although I don't think it's nearly as bad as it used to be. However, as I said earlier on, WordPress is the most popular CMS in the world, and therefore it's the biggest target in the world. So security is something you're going to definitely have to deal with in a proactive way. This is whether you're running it on Azure or not. So I always like to talk about this when I'm talking about WordPress, no matter what, because it's sometimes a topic that people gloss over, and I think it's very important. So let me go back to, just as an example here, let me go back to this sign-in screen again. This is a screen that a lot of hackers will be looking at on your site. Even if you don't think your site's very popular, they'll still be looking at it. They'll find it, and they will try to break into it and put spam on there. So let's look at this. This is the default WordPress login page. Let me go ahead and try to use a bogus password, like or a bogus username like Mark Greenway, and a bogus password. And if I click login, WordPress gives us a very helpful error that says invalid username. So a hacker knows right away that that username is not going to work. Let's try a real username, mgroves, and let's try a fake password. If I click login, WordPress again very helpfully tells us that the password is not correct, but the username is. So we're sort of giving some helpful information to a legitimate user, but we're also giving some helpful information to people trying to hack into your site. So one thing we can do is try to make this error message a little more generic so that it's not as helpful to hackers. And to do that, we're going to need a plugin. Again, pretty much every answer to a WordPress question is almost always a plugin. So there's lots of security plugins. The one I like to use is called All-in-One something security and firewall, something like that. All-in-One WP security and firewall. Yeah, this is my favorite one. There's lots of other ones out there. This one's pretty good. There's a lot of options. I'm just going to focus on one today, but this is definitely a plugin you should install and go through all of its recommendations and see if you can, see if they're acceptable to you on whatever site you're trying to create. We'll just look at one today. So I'll activate this plugin, and now there'll be a new item show up on my list over here, WP Security. So it has its own dashboard. A lot of dashboards today. But you can see in the very helpful graphic here that our security is in the yellow zone. We want it to be in the green zone. So there's lots of things we could do. We could go through each one of these items here and look at the options. One of the things we can look at in user accounts is it'll look at all your login names. And if any of them have the login name of admin, it's going to recommend that you change that login name. And the reason for this is that admin is the default WordPress administrator name. So right away, if you have that default name, then a hacker is going to be well on his way to trying to get into your account because he knows your username. So they recommend you go with something different, and that's why I used mgroves. So you can see I've got a good score here, 15 points out of 15 in the green column. Now let's go down to login. So here you can see there's some options to lock down the login, and right now I'm scoring 0 points on this security chart here. So let's start making some changes. So I want to enable lockdown. I want to allow a maximum of 3 login attempts. So if you're trying to guess my password, as long as it's a good password, it's going to take you more than 3 attempts to guess it. So after 3 attempts, we're going to lock out your IP address from trying again. And that's 3 attempts over a 5-minute period. And you'll be locked out for 60 minutes, which is more than enough to deter automatic password guessing robots from getting your password. We also want to show that generic error message. So we don't want to tell the user if they got their username or the password wrong. We just want to tell them that they got their login information wrong and not be any more specific than that. And if they use a username that's just incorrect, doesn't exist, we'll just lock them out immediately. We can also notify by email, which goes back to why we installed that email plugin in the beginning. Because if we want to get notifications that we're under attack, we're going to need email to do that. Let's go ahead and save these settings here. Scoring 20 points. If I go back to my login screen, and I use a wrong username again, now I get a more generic error message saying invalid login credentials. Even if I use my username and a bogus password, it'll say the same thing. So we made our site more secure, and that plugin has lots of different settings that allow us to do that, to improve the security of our WordPress site. So I highly recommend that you install that. These are basically the first two plugins I install on any WordPress site that I spin up, always. The email one, when I'm on Azure, and the security one, no matter what I'm doing. Okay, so that's security for now. Any questions about that? We're doing on time here, 7:30. Okay, we're doing well on time. All right, so let's go back over to Azure here, and we'll demonstrate another feature of Azure, which is kind of cool, and Mark showed this to me as well. Here's my website, brand new test, and I'll go to configure here, and I've set this site to be a this is on the free plan, this website, so some of these features are not unlocked, but there's a feature down here, if I can find it. Is it in here? Oh yeah, here we go. No, that's not it. Where's the Visual Studio on that, Mark? Here it is. So I have this option here to edit in Visual Studio Online. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that feature on and hit save. So now it's updating my configuration to enable me to edit my site in Visual Studio Online. So I go back to my dashboard. And in a second, here it is. So there's an option that shows up here that says Edit in Visual Studio Online. If I click this, it'll bring up a web-based tool that's similar to Visual Studio. If you guys are familiar with that tool, it's a coding tool that we use all the time, a desktop application. But there's a web-based version here called Visual Studio Online. And you can see that it's on the left panel here. These are all the files that make up my WordPress installation. So it's this. If you ever used WordPress before, these are the same type of files you'll see on a traditional hosting. And you'll see in content, there's a plugins directory. So where I installed the security plugin and the mail plugin, it's all just there in the file system. So let's go back over to the dashboard here. Another feature of WordPress is uploading files, media, typically images, but anything, PDFs or videos or whatever. So let me go ahead and add a new file here. And let me see if I can't find an interesting picture. Let's see. Oh yes, here's a picture of a book that I wrote that you should all buy. AOP and .NET. So that's the cover of my book. So I've uploaded that image there. I can upload a whole bunch of images just by dragging them here, or I can select them in the file dialog like this. If I go back to my media library, I'll see that I have one image showing up here in my media library. Let me go back over here to Visual Studio Online. And if I click on the Uploads folder, you'll see that oops, if I can screw it over here. So I uploaded this PNG file, and WordPress also creates some resized versions of that image. It's just an image file that's stored right here in the file system. And if I add more images, they'll show up here in the same folder, and so on. So that's fine. That's the standard WordPress approach. But with Azure, we can actually maybe do a little better here. So let's go back to our dashboard, and we're going to talk about storage service. So you want to talk about how this works a little bit, Mark?
All right. There's a concept of storage in Azure. Most of the time when you hear people talking about it, they're talking about file storage. It's called blob storage. Basically, they set up a whole bunch of web servers that just serve files, and they're really, really durable. They're everything you put in there. So this is east. So everything you put in the east data center automatically gets put in the west as well, just so you have it in case something goes wrong. So you're really, really safe. It's really, really fast. And it's just dumb storage. So you put something in there, and it'll serve it up however you tell it to. A lot of people will see when you're downloading files from different places like Netflix or things like that, you'll see S3 occasionally. That's Amazon's very, very similar tech idea, and you'll just see it occasionally on a bunch of different sites when you're downloading big files. So storage gives you that option. You say, I want, you sign up, you say, I want a new piece of storage. You're allowed to have 6 or so of these per account. You say, I want one, call it brand new test, and then it gives you a whole bunch, gives you a spot where you can upload files. You can also, there's also table and queue and stuff like that. Other interesting things, but not stuff we're doing today.
Right, so I've set up a storage service here. I called it brand new test. The way you create these is just plus new button, data services storage, and then quick create. And then you specify, again, the URL, which is .core.windows.net, a data center region type of subscription, and then as Mark was saying, geo-redundant, so it'll store it on multiple data centers there, and create that account. I already created one called brand new test. And so this is just a service, and a service can have one or more containers. So let me go over here to containers, and I've created a container already called my brand new WordPress files, and you can just click the add button and create a new container. Containers can be private or public. For WordPress though, we need them to be public. And then inside the container, right now it's just empty. There's no blobs in there right now. So we want to actually have WordPress talk to this container and store any files that I upload to the WordPress site, store them in this blob instead. And when someone requests an image from my site, request them from this blob instead. So what do you think the answer is to doing that in WordPress? If you guessed plugin, you are correct. So I'll go to plugins and I'll click add new. And there's a plugin here developed by Microsoft called Windows Azure Storage for WordPress. And here it is right here. So I'll click on details, and I can see that the author is Microsoft Open Technologies. So they created this free open source plugin for you to use with WordPress. And I'll go ahead and install that now. So it'll take a second to download this and actually unpack it onto the site. Once we install this plugin, we're going to configure it to connect to the container that we just created over on the Windows Azure dashboard. Okay, so there it's installed. Now I'll go ahead and activate it. Okay, and you can see that under settings now there's a new item here called Windows Azure. So this is how you configure your WordPress site to use that container. So for the store account name, I called it what? Brand new test? Is that right? Primary access key. So this is a key that you actually will have to get from your Azure dashboard. So I've selected brand new test here, and down here at the bottom I can see manage keys. And so here is a randomly generated, or I don't know how it's generated, but a random looking access key. I can just copy that, go back to my WordPress site, and paste that key in here. And so this should be updating. Why isn't it going?
You may have to click Save Changes for it to post back.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so once I save that, now my container shows up here. So you can see I have one container here, my brand new WordPress files. That's the public container. And that's it. So I selected that, and I click Save. So now anything I upload to my WordPress site in terms of media is going to go to that blob instead. So let's try it again by adding some more media here. And any more interesting pictures over here? Let's see, here's a picture of me holding. All I have is pictures of me in my book. A little bit narcissistic, I guess. But there we go. There's me with my book, and if I go to my media library, you can see that there I am with my book. So I have 2 images in my gallery. If I go back over here to Visual Studio Online, let's do a refresh here. It's still storing it in the file system. So what do we do wrong?
Yeah.
Is it this now too? Okay, we did something wrong.
Yep.
Let's go back to Windows Azure here.
Oh!
Forgot to check this checkbox. So there we go. We have to actually turn it on. All right.
I was like, I thought there was a checkbox.
Yeah. So let me try this again. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. So I'm back to one image, and if I refresh, I didn't have to refresh. You can see the file is no longer here. I'll go ahead and add that image back. Drag it up here. So here's me with the book again. Okay, and there it's uploading the same way. If I go to the library, I'll see that it's again 2 images. Back over here to Visual Studio, I reload, and notice there's no file here for the image I just uploaded. So it's not stored in the file system. If I go back here to my containers, I can see that all those files are stored here in the blob instead. And I can even copy this URL and paste it over here, and that'll take me right to that image. And you can see it's at brandnewtest.blob.core.windows.net. So that's the blob storage, and we've wired it up directly to WordPress. So we get the benefits of blob storage while still being able to use media in WordPress as we would normally. I can see that Carrie guessed plugin. Very good, Carrie.
One of the advantages of this, but there's a bunch of advantages. One, if you have a whole bunch of pictures, it doesn't have to request it through the WordPress. So you have, when your browser is connected to a website, you're allowed 2 concurrent connections, maybe 4 now. I think it's changed to 4. It used to be 2. So if you have 5 pictures and the page itself, then it downloads the first 4, and then it waits till those ones are done to start the other ones. If you have it in the blob storage, you get twice as many. You get more requests. So it's not counting the page against you. You get more. So you instantly get more downloads quicker. And if you're downloading it through the file system before you put it on blob storage, the web server has to think about it, look for the file. It takes a little bit. It just takes that little bit extra longer to say, hey, yeah, this is the file. Here's what you're looking for. When you have it on blob storage knows immediately, this is what you want. I'm going to send it as quick as I can. Plus, you are if you're uploading a whole bunch of files, blob storage is big. You can make it. You can put terabytes of data in there. With Windows Azure websites, which is where the original file is stored, where just the book cover is stored, that you're limited to 1 gig of storage over all of your websites together. So those are some of the reasons why you want it over blob storage.
Yeah, great. So we've got blob storage set up there. So our WordPress site is very Azure friendly right now. We've got email set up and a blob storage plugin set up. But to anyone who's used to using WordPress, it doesn't look any different than normal. It's very much the same software. So we're taking advantage of the features of Azure while not making any drastic changes to WordPress itself. Okay, so that is all that I wanted to cover for sure today. So if you guys have questions, I'd be glad to cover them, or we can go into discussing some more stuff about comments on WordPress. Any preferences? So we picked up a new guest here. Okay, so let's talk about comments since Carrie brought that question up earlier today. So with comments, we have settings and we have this, I think it's discussion. So these are a bunch of different settings you can change to determine how you want to set your comment policy. So, for instance, you can turn off comments after the post is older than a certain number of days. Just not allow comments anymore. You can enable nested or threaded comments up to a certain number of levels deep. You can set paging for comments. So if you have a very popular post and there's lots of discussion, then you don't necessarily want to show all 5,000 comments on the same page. So you can break that up into different pages. Get email notification when someone posts a comment. And then you can also start setting up comment moderation. So by default, this is the default WordPress setting that before a comment appears, the author must already have a previously approved comment. Otherwise, the comment must be manually approved. So any comment that comes in, I have to go in and say, okay, yes, I approve of that comment before it appears on my site. And you can turn those on and off however you want to. Here are those moderation lists talking about. So these comments that contain these words will be held for moderation. They won't be marked as spam. They'll just be held until you approve them. So if you put in some curse words in here, then it'll hold those comments off the public site until you approve them. And then blacklists here, this will actually be marked as spam. So if I put some words in here that if the comment contains those words, it'll get put into the spam bucket. And there's also some stuff with avatars down here, very important right now, just graphics that appear with the comments. But as I said before, this is kind of a losing battle because people can get very creative with their curse words, and spammers can get very creative with the terms and URLs that they use in their comments. So I recommend against this. If you want to try to, if it's a G-rated site, for instance, you might want to try to stem some of that with comment moderation. But as far as spam goes, you're not going to win that battle. Spammers are far too good at what they do. So what I would recommend instead is, guess what? Plugin. And it's already installed here. It comes with WordPress by default. It's called Akismet. And I'm just going to turn it on here. Akismet is a way for you to determine if a comment is spam by submitting it to the Akismet service. And this service is hosted by the company that created WordPress, Automatic, I think is what they're called. And you submit a comment to them, and they will give you back a probability that that comment is spam. So they may say, we're 90% sure this comment is spam, or we're 80% sure this comment is spam. And then you can determine, well, I want to, anything that's 80% or more, I want to mark that as spam. So they give you sort of a probability. And the way they do this is they collect spam comments from hundreds and thousands of different websites like this one and aggregate them and use Bayesian filters and machine learning to build up a database of rules that let them tell you with a pretty good degree of certainty that something is spam or not. So to use Akismet, we actually have to get an API key. So there's a little icon here that shows up. We can activate our accounts. And I can create a new key, or I can enter one that I already have. If I create a new key, I have to go to the Akismet site and sign up for it, and so on. If I already have a key, I can just paste that key in here. It's going to be a random-looking sequence of letters and numbers. Enter there. And that's the key I have to use. Without that key, I can't use the Akismet service. So once that key's in, any comment will be submitted to Akismet. And I don't have the key. I don't have a key to give you to show in the demo, but there's some more settings you can do with Akismet. And what will happen if you go back to comments here, that we have, so it looks like Mark's already left a comment. So he left a comment on the site. This is a comment that's not from me. So since he's never been approved for a comment before, I actually have to go in and approve his comment before it appears on the site. Now, if he happened to use some spammy words in here, his comment might end up over here in this spam bucket instead. And so the spam is just sort of a separate list of pending. Now, even if you have a small site, even if you think your site gets no traffic at all, it's going to get hit by spam bots. And you're going to see that list of spam grow and grow and grow. It's going to be, hundreds and thousands before you even know it. So you can go in there and empty that spam box out yourself whenever you want to, or you can automatically delete spam messages after a certain period of time. So there's really not much more to say about it. Akismet's a pretty amazing plugin. It's pretty much magic. And it's used by WordPress, of course, but you can also use it with other content management systems as well through their API, which I've actually done myself. It's a great tool for that. In all the years I've used Akismet, it's maybe had a handful of false positives, so comments that weren't spam that were actually marked as spam. And so it's just so rare that it's definitely worth the trade-off there. So that's Akismet. So if you're going to use the WordPress comment system, that's the way you should go. You should definitely install Akismet, especially if you're going to allow anyone to leave a comment.
Great, thank you so much for telling me about that.
Yeah, no problem. The other way to deal with comments is you can also use comments from third-party services. So you can use Facebook comments or Disqus, D-I-S-Q-U-S comments. And so you don't even host the comments on your own site. You have them hosted on Facebook or on Disqus or some other third-party service. And of course, the way you do that is, again, just plugins. So we can go ahead and look for a Disqus plugin here. I don't think I've actually done this in a while. But yeah, there's the Disqus comment system. And we can see that it adds this third-party Disqus comments to your blog post. It replaces the built-in WordPress blog posts or WordPress comments with the Disqus comments. And same with Facebook. So that's another way you could approach it. Just, move the problem off onto somebody else's site and let them deal with it, and don't have to deal with spam comments.
It also lightens your load on your server because all it has is a little thing that says, "Hey, go look somewhere else for this," instead of doing all the comments and loading them, and it makes it so that your server's working a lot less hard. So if you do get a lot more, if you do blow up and find yourself on Hacker News, you really are going to want the fact that you've got Disqus running.
Yeah, and these are all great ways to deal with lots of traffic as well. So, yeah, again, have Disqus deal with the traffic and not you.
I mean, the point of a blog is to have it blow up and become something big. You want a lot of people to visit your blog eventually.
So this is the screenshot that Mark just posted in the room. So once you have Akismet installed, you'll see some of these options here. And you can auto-delete comments or see the network status of the Akismet servers and so on. So that's pretty much all I have prepared. Again, I could talk about WordPress for hours if you guys have more questions about specific things in WordPress. And Mark can address all kinds of Azure questions. So anything you got, we have time for questions now. Bring back up the slides here. If you guys think of something later, you're welcome to contact me, about.me/mgroves. You can get my email on there, my Twitter, on my GitHub account if you're interested in looking at some code examples. Feel free to ask me any questions about WordPress or Azure, and there's Mark's About Me page as well. I'm sure he'd be willing to answer questions as well.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, guys. So we do have someone typing in a question, but in the meantime, I'll just Also, let you know that you can reach our program, the MVP Mentor program, at mvpmentor@microsoft.com if you have any other questions. And then Seth's question is, I may have missed it earlier, but approximately what does it cost to run a low-traffic WP blog on Azure?
So that's a good question. It's not really specific to WordPress, but the site that I created, the brand new test site, by default this is going to be in free mode, which means that you're limited in the amount of bandwidth and disk space that you can use, but up to that limit is totally free. So it's not going to cost you anything. Now, we did show the blob storage and the SQL server. There may be some additional costs with that.
Blob storage.
Sorry, go ahead.
Blob storage, you pay for storage. You pay a few cents per gigabyte per month for bandwidth and storage. With the SQL one, when you go in there and picking a SQL database, when you're setting it up, there is an option for a very tiny 20 megabytes, which is actually surprisingly a lot when you're just running a blog or just running a CMS out of it. You get a free one for that. If you there you go. You say 20 megabytes is free. So that's, and then when you get out, if you start to put a lot more in there, then you have to upgrade to something where you're paying probably less than $10 a month for the database. For the Azure SQL Azure database. Sorry, trying to remember the right branding names.
Yeah, there's actually a on my blog. I recently linked to a calculator that they have on WindowsAzure.net that shows you if a rough estimate of how much bandwidth and how much disk space you're going to use, what the cost will be per month. And I believe as well there's I think going on right now, there's a free trial of Azure where you get a month of Azure with a $200 credit. So for that first month, you can just go crazy and play with whatever you want to do and see how much it costs. And as long as it doesn't go over $200, it's not going to be anything out of pocket for you to just sort of test the waters there in terms of costs.
I know you get a certain level with MSDN subscriptions as well.
Yes, that's correct.
So you need to get some credits there.
Well, there you go. There's a link right there from Carrie. I'll bring that up here in my browser. So you get $200 on services, and that's over a 1 month period, I believe. So go crazy with that and see how much it'll cost you. It's not that much. It really is. It's surprisingly low cost, especially for a low traffic site.
Yeah, I'll also point out that there are a lot of resources for students at dreamspark.com, and you can check that out as well.
I've not used DreamSpark before, but I have heard that you can get a whole lot of good Microsoft stuff for very, very low cost or free.
Well, great. Any other questions for our mentors? Okay, that looks like we got them all. So if you guys want to let the students know again where and how they can reach you for more questions, that's great, and I'll put our links in the chat box as well. But other than that, I just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone who joined us today, and also thank you very much for the mentors today for giving us their time and for showing us how to do this. So we really appreciate it. And please feel free to reach out to us at any point as well. It's mvpmentor@microsoft.com. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having us, Gary. I appreciate it.
I was saying thank you and I muted myself.